The school assembly hall was filled with the sound of chatter, laughter, and footsteps. Students were finding their seats. Teachers were arranging chairs, and the principal was testing the microphone. In the middle of all this noise sat a shy girl named Emma. She kept her hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. Her heart was beating fast because she knew something was coming. Something that scared her more than anything else. Emma was a quiet girl, the kind who spoke softly and smiled politely but rarely said much. She was always the one who sat at the edge of the group, listening while others laughed. Her classmates often forgot she was even there. She wasn't popular, she wasn't loud, and she didn't try to be noticed. But deep inside, Emma had something special, a love for music, especially the piano. Today, however, music felt far away. The school principal had announced that this year's assembly would include a special showcase where students would perform their talents. Some would dance, some would sing, and a few would play instruments. It was meant to be fun and inspiring. But to Emma, it was terrifying. She had never played in front of anyone except her mother, and now she might have to perform in front of the entire school. As she sat in the last row of chairs, she could feel her stomach twist with nerves. She glanced at the stage, the bright lights, the large curtains, the shiny grand piano standing proudly in the center. It looked beautiful, but it also looked scary. She wondered how people managed to walk up there so confidently, how they smiled, bowed, and made everything look so easy around her. Other students were laughing and chatting. Some were excited about showing off their talent. Others whispered jokes or checked their phones. Emma stayed quiet. She wished she could disappear. Maybe if she stayed small and silent, no one would notice her. She pulled at her sleeves and tried to calm herself. The principal's voice echoed through the speakers. "Good morning, everyone. Today is a very special day." The students clapped lazily. A few cheered. Emma looked down, pretending to fix her shoelace. Her heart thumped so loudly that she could barely hear what was being said. She wasn't even sure if she would be chosen to perform, but the thought alone made her palms sweat. Her friend Lily leaned toward her and whispered, "You look nervous, Emma. Are you okay?" Emma nodded quickly, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine," she lied. Lily smiled kindly and whispered again, "You'll be amazing if you play. I've heard you before." But Emma just shook her head. "No one wants to hear me play," she murmured. The truth was, Emma loved the piano more than anything. It was her safe place when she touched the keys. The world around her disappeared. The notes spoke for her when words couldn't. She didn't need to be brave or popular or funny. She just needed the melody. But here, surrounded by hundreds of people, that comfort vanished as the assembly continued. The first performers went on stage. A boy sang a pop song loudly but off-key, and everyone laughed. A girl performed a short dance routine. Another student played the guitar. The audience clapped politely, but most of them were whispering or giggling between acts. Emma felt her throat tighten. She imagined walking onto that stage and forgetting everything. What if her fingers froze? What if she pressed the wrong key? She tried to tell herself it wouldn't happen, but her fear kept growing. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest, fast and heavy. She imagined people laughing at her, whispering, "She messed up," or "She's terrible." That thought made her want to run away. She wished she could go home, back to her little apartment where her old piano waited for her. The sound of applause pulled her out of her thoughts. The principal smiled and said, "Next, we'll have a short break. After that, we'll continue with our music performances." The hall buzzed with chatter again. Emma sighed with relief. She had time to calm down. She walked to the side of the hall and looked at the piano again. The black and white keys glimmered under the stage lights, inviting and intimidating at the same time. She remembered how her mother always told her, "Emma, the piano doesn't judge you, it listens." Her mother's words echoed in her head, making her heart ache with warmth. Emma had learned to play by herself, watching videos, reading simple music sheets, and practicing late into the night sometimes. Her neighbors would bang on the wall, telling her to keep it down, but she would just smile quietly and continue. The piano was the one thing that made her feel alive. Standing there, Emma felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Maybe one day she could play for others, not to show off, but to make them feel what she felt. The peace, the emotion, the magic of music. She wanted people to listen, really listen, but that dream felt far away, and the fear of embarrassment was too strong. As the bell rang and students returned to their seats, Emma sat back down and took a deep breath. She didn't know what the future held, but she could feel something shifting inside her. Maybe today would be just another day. Or maybe it would be the start of something she never expected. Her teacher, Mrs. Collins, looked across the hall and caught Emma's eye. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that said she knew something Emma didn't. Emma quickly looked away, blushing. She didn't know it yet. But that small smile would soon lead her onto the stage and change her life forever. And as the lights dimmed and the microphone crackled, Emma sat quietly, unaware that her shy heart was about to do something extraordinary, something that would silence the entire assembly, something that would make them all remember her name. Emma, the girl who thought she had nothing to show, was about to find her voice through the keys of a piano. Emma's house was small and quiet, a little apartment at the end of an old street. The paint on the walls was chipped, and the floor creaked with every step. But to Emma, it was home. In one corner of the living room stood her most precious treasure, a second-hand piano. The wood was scratched and some keys were slightly loose, but when Emma touched them, they came alive. The piano had a soft, gentle sound that filled the tiny apartment like sunlight sneaking through a window. Her mother had bought it years ago from a music store that was closing down. She had saved for months, skipping lunches at work, just to surprise her daughter. Emma still remembered that day clearly. Her mother had come home with two men carrying the piano up the stairs. She stood at the door, her hands over her mouth in shock. "For you, sweetheart," her mother said. Smiling, Emma had hugged her tightly, too happy to speak that night. She played her first tune, slow and clumsy, but full of feeling. Every day after school, Emma would come home, drop her bag, and sit at the piano. Sometimes she played cheerful songs, sometimes sad ones. She didn't need words to express how she felt. The music spoke for her. Her fingers moved slowly at first, but with time, they became quick and confident. When she played, the world outside disappeared. The noise, the teasing, the loneliness at school, all of it faded away. It was just her and the music. Her mother, Maria, loved to listen. She would sit in the kitchen after a long day at work, drinking tea and closing her eyes as the music filled the room. "You play like you have an old soul," she would say softly. Emma would laugh. Maybe the piano is old enough for both of us. They didn't have much, but when Emma played, it didn't matter. The small apartment felt full of life, warmth, and love. But at school, no one knew about Emma's talent. She never told anyone. She was afraid of being laughed at. Some kids already teased her for being quiet or for wearing old clothes. If they knew she spent her evenings playing piano instead of hanging out or scrolling through her phone, they'd probably call her weird, so she kept her music a secret, like a piece of magic that only she and her mother shared. Sometimes when she passed by the music room at school, she would stop and listen. The school piano was big and shiny, with clean keys and a beautiful tone. She would peek inside when no one was there and imagine herself sitting there, playing for an audience. The thought both excited and terrified her. She would quickly shake her head and whisper to herself, "No, that's not me." Her mother, though, believed differently. "You have a gift." "Emma," she said one evening, "you shouldn't hide it forever." Emma sighed. "I'm not special, Mom. I just play for fun." Her mother smiled knowingly. Sometimes, the ones who say they're not special are the ones the world remembers. Those words stayed in Emma's mind, even when she didn't want to admit it. Whenever she pressed a key, she could almost hear her mother's voice in her head. "Music will take you somewhere someday." Emma didn't know where that somewhere was, but she hoped it was a place where she wouldn't have to feel invisible anymore. One Saturday morning, as sunlight spilled through the window, Emma sat at the piano trying to learn a new piece. It was a classical melody she had found online. The notes were complicated. Her fingers stumbled, but she didn't give up. She practiced over and over, repeating small parts until they felt right. Hours passed without her noticing. When she finally stopped, her hands were sore, but her heart felt light. She smiled quietly to herself. It was her secret world. Her mother peeked in, smiling. "Still playing, sweetheart?" Emma nodded. "I almost got it right this time." "You always do," her mother said, kissing her forehead. "You just don't believe it yet." That night, while her mother was at work, Emma sat alone in the dim light of the living room. The sounds of the city drifted through the window. Cars passing, dogs barking, people talking, but the piano drowned it all out. The tune she played was slow and full of emotion. It told a story without words, a story of dreams, struggles and hope. She didn't know that her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, often stood by her door listening. The old woman smiled every time she heard the music. "That girl," she told her husband, "has magic in her fingers." But Emma never knew anyone was listening. To her, it was just practice. At school, the days went by the same as always. She kept to herself, did her homework, and tried not to attract attention. But inside, she carried her secret, a piece of her soul hidden behind quiet eyes. Music gave her confidence even if she never showed it. When she walked through the noisy hallways or sat alone at lunch, she would hum softly to herself, reminding herself that she had something no one else could take away. One day, as she played softly at home, her mother leaned against the doorway, watching her daughter with pride. "Emma," she said gently, "I wish your teachers could hear you play like this." Emma laughed nervously. "They'd probably think I'm strange." Her mother shook her head. "No, they'd think you're special." Emma didn't know it then, but her mother's words would soon come true. Life had a way of pushing her into the spotlight, even when she tried to stay in the shadows. As the final note echoed through the room, Emma smiled. Her heart felt peaceful. She didn't need applause or attention, at least not yet. For now, the piano was her best friend, her diary, her voice, and even though she didn't realize it, that old secondhand piano was already changing her life note by note. Somewhere deep inside, a dream was growing quietly, like a seed waiting for the right moment to bloom, and soon, that moment would come. The day when Emma's hidden talent would no longer be a secret, and her music would finally speak to the world louder than her fears ever could. It was a bright Monday morning, and the classroom buzzed with chatter as students filled their seats. The smell of chalk and paper hung in the air. Emma sat quietly near the window, her notebook open, drawing little music notes in the corner of the page. She didn't expect anything unusual to happen that day, but fate had its own plan. Mrs. Collins, the music teacher, walked into the room with a cheerful smile. She was holding a stack of papers and humming softly. The class slowly settled down, though a few students kept whispering, "Good morning, everyone." Mrs. Collins said warmly, "I have an exciting announcement today." Her words caught everyone's attention, even Emma's. The teacher continued, "Next month, our school will be hosting the annual Assembly and Talent Showcase." The room instantly filled with excitement. Students began whispering eagerly. Some grinned, others groaned. Mrs. Collins raised her hand. "Now, before you all start making noise, let me explain," she said, laughing. "This year, we'll have a special performance section. Singing, dancing, poetry, instruments, anything that shows your talent." Emma felt a small shiver run through her. The word instruments echoed in her head like a drumbeat. She lowered her eyes to her desk, hoping the teacher wouldn't notice her reaction. Mrs. Collins smiled and added, "There will also be special guests, parents, teachers, and even local reporters from the community paper. It's a big opportunity to shine." That sentence made Emma's stomach twist. The idea of performing in front of hundreds of people made her feel dizzy. She could barely talk in class without stammering. How could she play piano in front of so many faces? Across the room, her friend Lily leaned closer and whispered, "Emma, this is perfect for you. You can finally show everyone how amazing you are at piano." Emma's eyes widened. No, I can't," she whispered back quickly. "I'd mess up, everyone would laugh." Lily shook her head. "You won't mess up. You're better than half the people here. You just don't believe it." Emma gave her a small smile but said nothing. Deep down she knew Lily meant well, but her fear was too strong. Mrs. Collins started writing the event details on the board. "If anyone wants to participate, sign up on this sheet by Friday," she said. "Don't be shy. This is your moment to express yourself." She placed the paper on her desk, and students immediately began lining up to sign their names. Emma watched from her seat as the confident ones went first. A tall boy named Josh, who always showed off his guitar skills, wrote his name in bold letters. "I'm doing a rock solo," he announced proudly. The class cheered. Then a girl named Ava said she would sing a popular song. Someone else said they'd dance, another said they'd do a funny skit. Everyone seemed so sure of themselves, so fearless. Emma wished she could borrow just a bit of that courage. She imagined herself walking to the front, writing Emma, piano on that paper. But her hands trembled at the thought. What if she froze on stage? What if she hit the wrong note? The fear of embarrassment pulled her back into silence. After class, Lily walked beside her down the hall. You're really not signing up? She asked. Emma shook her head. I'm not ready. I can't play in front of people. I'll make a fool of myself. Lily sighed. You've been hiding behind that excuse for too long. Emma looked down at her shoes, unable to answer. That night at home, Emma sat in front of her piano. Her mother walked in carrying a cup of tea. You look deep in thought, she said softly. Emma shrugged. They're doing a showcase at school. Her mother smiled. That's wonderful, Emma frowned. Not for me. I could never perform in front of everyone. Her mother set the tea down and sat beside her. Do you remember what I told you? Emma nodded slowly. That music will take me somewhere someday. Exactly, her mother said. But it can't take you anywhere if you're too scared to let others hear it. Emma sighed. What if I fail? Her mother smiled gently. Then you try again. But what if you don't fail? What if you shine? Those words stayed in Emma's head long after her mother left the room. She placed her hands on the keys and played softly. The melody filled the air like a whisper of courage. She imagined herself on stage. Under the lights, everyone watching in silence. The thought scared her, but somewhere deep inside, it also thrilled her. The next day at school, the sign-up sheet was almost full. Mrs. Collins reminded everyone. Last day to sign up tomorrow. Don't miss your chance, Emma sat at her desk, her heart pounding. She looked at the paper on the teacher's desk and felt torn between fear and hope. At lunch, Lily tried one last time. Emma, you're going to regret it if you don't sign up, she said. Sometimes, the scariest things turn into the best memories. Emma smiled faintly. Maybe, she whispered, though she wasn't sure. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining the piano waiting for her. Her mother's words echoed again and again. What if you shine? The next morning, she arrived at school early. The hallways were still quiet. Mrs. Collins's classroom door was open. The paper was still on the desk, half filled with names. Emma walked in slowly. Her heart raced. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the pen. She hesitated for a moment, then finally wrote her name in small letters. Emma, piano. She quickly placed the pen down and hurried out before anyone saw. Her heart was pounding, her hands shaking. But for the first time she felt something new, a mix of fear and excitement. All day she kept thinking about what she had done. Part of her wanted to take her name off the list, but another part of her felt proud. It was as if she had finally taken a small step towards something she had always dreamed of, but never dared to try. That evening, when she told her mother, Maria's eyes filled with tears. I knew you'd do it, she said, hugging her tightly. You just needed a little push. Emma smiled shyly. I'm still scared, her mother whispered. That's how you know it matters. As Emma sat down at her piano that night, she began to play again. This time, the music felt different, braver, louder, freer. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She had finally said yes to the thing that scared her most, and that was the beginning of something extraordinary. A week passed, and the excitement around the upcoming school assembly grew stronger every day. Posters were pinned on the walls, teachers were rehearsing with students, and the sound of laughter and music filled the hallways. Everyone seemed full of energy and confidence. Everyone except Emma. She tried to stay calm, but every time she heard someone talking about the event, her stomach twisted. She couldn't stop thinking about the fact that her name was on that list. Emma, piano, written in her small, shaky handwriting. Part of her wanted to erase it, to pretend she never signed up. But every time she thought about her mother's proud smile, she couldn't do it on Wednesday morning. Mrs. Collins walked into class with her usual bright smile. All right, everyone, she said, clapping her hands. I have the list of confirmed performers for next week's assembly. The room filled with whispers and excitement. I know you've all been waiting for this, she added. Waving the paper in her hand, Emma's heart started beating faster. She looked down at her notebook, not wanting to draw attention to herself. Mrs. Collins began reading the names one by one. Josh, guitar performance. Ava singing, Liam push poetry, Sarah, dance. The class clapped after each name, cheering for their friends. Then Mrs. Collins looked at the paper again and smiled. And Emma, piano. The room went silent for a second, then a few heads turned. Some students looked surprised, others smirked. Emma? Someone whispered. Since when does she play piano? A few giggles followed. Emma felt her cheeks grow hot. She wished she could disappear. Mrs. Collins smiled warmly. Yes, Emma plays beautifully. I've heard her during break time. She doesn't know I was listening, but trust me, she has real talent. Emma's head shot up in surprise. She had no idea her teacher had ever heard her play. The class began to murmur, and Lily turned around and gave her a proud thumbs up. Told you, she mouthed. Emma tried to smile, but her hands were shaking under the desk. After class, as everyone left the room, a few students stopped near her desk. You can really play? One boy asked, half curious, half skeptical. Emma nodded quietly. A little, she said softly. Another girl laughed. I didn't even know you did anything besides homework. The others chuckled and walked away. Emma looked down, pretending it didn't bother her, but deep inside her heart sank. Lily walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, don't listen to them. They just don't know you yet. Emma forced a small smile. Yeah, maybe, she whispered. That evening, when she got home, her mother noticed her quiet face. Rough day? She asked. Emma nodded. Everyone laughed when they heard I was performing. They think I can't do it. Her mother sighed softly and pulled her into a hug. Let them laugh, sweetheart. They'll stop when they hear you play. Emma leaned against her and whispered, What if I freeze up? What if I forget everything? Her mother looked her in the eyes. You won't forget. Because you'll be playing from here, she said, tapping Emma's chest gently. When music comes from the heart, it never goes wrong. Later that night, Emma sat at her piano. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The melody filled the room, gentle at first, then strong and full of emotion. Every note seemed to wash away her fear a little more. She imagined herself on stage, not surrounded by judgment or laughter, but by the same peace she felt now, alone in her home at school. The days leading up to the assembly were busy. Students were rehearsing in classrooms, in the hall, even outside under the trees. Every time Emma passed by a group practicing, her nerves grew worse. She started doubting herself again. She wasn't loud or bold like the others. Her music was quiet and full of feeling. Would people even appreciate that? Then, 2 days before the event, Mrs. Collins called her after class. Emma, can I talk to you for a minute? She asked kindly. Emma walked up to her desk, her heart pounding. I just wanted to tell you, Mrs. Collins said, that I'm proud of you for signing up. I know it took courage. Emma smiled nervously. I'm scared, Mrs. Collins, she admitted. Mrs. Collins nodded. That's normal. Everyone feels that way before they perform. But remember, and your music is special, you don't need to be loud to be heard. Sometimes the quietest melodies touch people the most. Her words gave Emma strength. That night she practiced for hours. Her fingers moved faster, her confidence slowly building. She played the same song over and over until every note felt like a part of her. The next morning, something unexpected happened during recess. Emma walked past the music room and saw a small group of students inside. The piano lid was open and someone was playing random notes. Josh, the guitar player, laughed. This thing sounds boring. How do people even use it? Before she could stop herself, Emma said softly, You have to feel it. Not just hit the keys. Everyone turned to look at her. Josh raised an eyebrow. Oh, look who's giving lessons now, he said jokingly. Emma blushed. Sorry. I didn't mean... Mrs. Collins suddenly appeared at the door, smiling. Actually, Emma's right. Playing the piano isn't about power. It's about emotion. She turned to the group. And soon, you'll all see what she means. The students fell quiet, and Emma felt a strange warmth in her chest. For the first time, her teacher had publicly defended her. She wasn't invisible anymore. When she got home that day, she played the piano with a new kind of determination. She thought about every laugh, every doubt, and every whisper, and decided she would prove them wrong. On the night before the assembly, she sat at her piano for the last time before the big day. Her mother stood behind her, hands on her shoulders. You're ready, she said softly. Emma looked up. What if they still don't believe in me? Her mother smiled. Then make them. As Emma played her final practice song, the melody filled the small apartment like a promise. She wasn't sure how tomorrow would go, but one thing was clear: she would walk onto that stage, face her fear, and let her music speak for her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just the quiet girl in the back row. She was Emma, the girl with the piano, and she was ready to be heard. The day of the assembly finally arrived. The school hall was decorated with colorful banners, bright lights, and a big sign that said, "Annual Talent Showcase. Believe in your dreams." Students were running around, teachers were checking microphones, and parents were starting to fill the seats. The air was full of excitement, and somewhere inside all that noise sat Emma, feeling like her heart might burst out of her chest. She sat backstage, holding her trembling hands together around her. The other performers were chatting and laughing. Josh was tuning his guitar, Ava was warming up her voice, and Sarah was adjusting her dance costume. Everyone seemed so confident, so ready. Emma felt small among them, like she didn't belong there. Mrs. Collins came by with a warm smile. "Everyone ready?" she asked cheerfully. The students nodded. Emma tried to smile but couldn't hide her nervousness. Mrs. Collins noticed right away and knelt beside her. "Hey," she said softly, "you'll do great, remember? Don't think about the people, think about the piano." Emma nodded, whispering, "I'll try." The assembly began, and the sound of applause filled the hall. The principal went on stage, greeting everyone. "Welcome, parents, teachers, and students. Today, you'll see the wonderful talents of our young stars." The crowd clapped again. The first performance began, a dance routine with bright costumes and loud music. The audience cheered. Then came a funny skit that made everyone laugh. After that, Josh played his guitar solo, showing off with quick, flashy chords. Everyone clapped and shouted his name. Emma sat backstage, her heart pounding faster with every act. Finally, Mrs. Collins appeared and said, "Emma, you're next." Emma froze. "Next?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "Yes," her teacher said kindly. "You're going to be wonderful." Emma took a deep breath, her hands cold and shaky. She could hear the audience clapping for the last act. Then silence as the stage was cleared. She stepped out slowly, the lights bright and blinding. The grand piano stood in the center, gleaming under the stage lights. For a moment she just stood there, frozen. The crowd was quiet, watching. She could hear whispers from the students in the audience. "Is that Emma?" Someone said, "What's she doing?" Emma's throat felt dry. She walked to the piano and sat down. Her legs were trembling. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. She remembered what Mrs. Collins had said. "Don't think about the people, think about the piano." She looked down at the keys, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Just you and me." Her teacher had told her to play something simple, something short. "Just a light tune to fill the time before the next performance," Mrs. Collins had said. Emma had nodded politely, but deep inside she had made a different plan. She didn't want to play something simple. She wanted to play something real, something that meant something to her. So instead of the easy tune everyone expected, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play the piece she had been practicing for months, the one she used to play late at night at home, the one that made her mother smile. The first few notes were soft and gentle, floating through the hall like a whisper. At first, people kept talking quietly, but as the melody grew stronger, the sound of voices began to fade. The hall started to fall silent. Emma forgot where she was. The stage, the crowd, the lights, everything disappeared. It was just her and the piano. Her fingers moved faster now, dancing across the keys with confidence she didn't even know she had. The music rose and fell like waves, full of emotion, full of life. Every note told a story, her story. She remembered the nights she practiced until her hands hurt, the mornings she walked to school afraid of being noticed, the teasing, the laughter, the fear of failure, all of it poured out through her fingers. The music was no longer just sound, it was her voice, her courage, her soul. The audience sat completely still, watching in awe. The teachers exchanged glances. Surprised, even Josh, who had been so confident earlier, stared in disbelief. "That's Emma," he whispered. The melody built higher and higher, the notes filling the room like magic. Emma's eyes were closed now, tears threatening to fall. She felt every sound, every emotion. It was as if the piano was speaking for her, telling the world everything she had kept hidden inside. And then just as suddenly the music softened. The notes slowed down until they faded into a gentle, trembling finish. Her hands rested on the keys for a moment. The final sound lingered in the air like a heartbeat. Then silence, the whole hall was frozen. For a few long seconds, no one moved, no one spoke. Emma looked up nervously, afraid she had done something wrong. The lights felt too bright, her breathing was fast. Then out of nowhere, someone began to clap. One pair of hands, then another. Then the entire hall erupted into applause. The sound of clapping echoed loudly. Students stood up cheering. Teachers smiled proudly. The principal stood, clapping harder than anyone. Mrs. Collins wiped a tear from her eye. "I knew she had it in her," she whispered. Emma sat frozen, her heart pounding. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All she could do was smile, a shaky, beautiful smile that came straight from her heart. She stood and bowed shyly, her cheeks red but glowing. When she walked off stage, Lily ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Emma, you were amazing," she cried. I told you you could do it." Emma laughed through her tears. "I was so scared," she said. "I thought I'd mess everything up." Lily shook her head. "You didn't mess up, you made everyone silent, Emma. You made them feel something." Mrs. Collins came over and hugged her too. "You didn't just play the piano," she said softly. "You spoke through it. You showed them your heart." For the first time in her life, Emma felt seen. She wasn't the shy, invisible girl anymore. She was the girl who made an entire room fall silent with her music. As she walked home that day, her mother was waiting outside the apartment. She had come straight from work. Still in her uniform, when she saw Emma's face, glowing with happiness, she didn't need to ask what happened. She just opened her arms and said, "I told you. Music would take you somewhere," and Emma, still in her stage outfit, hugged her mother tightly and whispered, "You were right, Mom, it finally did." Then she smiled, knowing deep down that this was only the beginning of something even greater. The first few notes left Emma's fingertips like a soft breeze, gentle and shy, floating through the hall. The sound was delicate, but it carried something that made people stop talking. The hall that had been full of whispers and laughter moments ago began to quiet down. Heads turned toward the stage, teachers stopped their conversations, and even the restless students fell still. They didn't expect this, not from the quiet girl who hardly spoke in class. Emma sat there, her back straight, her fingers trembling slightly as they moved across the piano keys. The lights above her were warm and bright, and the crowd below her was nothing but a blur of faces. She didn't see them anymore, she didn't hear their murmurs. All she heard was the music and her music. Each note seemed to tell a story. The melody began soft and slow, like a whisper of something fragile. Then it started to build, rising with emotion. Every sound felt like it came straight from her heart. Every key she pressed carried a piece of her life. She remembered the lonely days sitting by herself at lunch, the times when people ignored her, the moments she felt invisible, but through the music, she wasn't invisible anymore. The notes spoke louder than any words could. They were strong, brave, full of feeling. As the song grew deeper, the emotions inside her burst open. Her fingers moved faster, more confidently. The melody swirled through the air, powerful, breathtaking. It filled every corner of the hall, bouncing off the walls like a heartbeat. The teachers on stage looked at each other. Astonished, the principal leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. Even Josh, who had boasted about his guitar solo earlier, stared in disbelief. Emma didn't notice any of them. Her eyes were half closed. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. It was like the piano, and she had become one. The keys answered her emotions, the notes rising and falling like waves on the ocean. The fear she had carried all week melted away. The laughter, the doubt, the teasing, then it all faded. In that moment, she was free. Then came the part she had practiced the most, the high, bright notes that needed perfect timing. Her heart pounded, but her fingers didn't fail her. They danced gracefully across the keyboard, confident and sure. The sound that came out was rich and full. It was no longer just music, and it was magic. People in the audience began to lean forward. Completely silent, they could feel it, the raw, pure emotion in every note. Parents forgot to check their phones. Students forgot to whisper. It was as if time had paused just to listen to her. The melody changed again, turning softer, sadder. Like the sound of memories, Emma thought of her mother, sitting at home after a long day, always smiling even when she was tired, always believing in her. The thought made her eyes sting with tears. She blinked them away and kept playing, pouring all that love and gratitude into her music. The audience didn't just hear her song, they felt it. The sadness, the beauty, the courage hidden inside every sound. Her small fingers moved with the grace of someone who had lived 1,000 stories. The piano keys glimmered under the lights. and the music seemed to float above her like a dream. The melody reached its peak fast and powerful, her hands flying over the keys, every note hit perfectly. Every sound filled the air like thunder wrapped in silk. She wasn't nervous anymore. She was alive, glowing with confidence she never knew she had. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the music began to slow. The notes softened, fading like a sunset. Each sound became lighter, gentler, until only a whisper of melody was left. Emma pressed the final key and held it for a moment, letting the sound linger, letting her heart rest. Silence, not a single clap, not a single word. The air itself seemed frozen. The last note hung in the room like a delicate thread. Emma sat there, breathing hard, her eyes wide for a second. Fear returned, and had she done something wrong? Had they hated it? Then one person stood up and began to clap. Slowly, more hands joined in, then suddenly, the entire hall exploded with applause. Loud, powerful, endless. Students stood, teachers cheered. Parents whistled. The sound was overwhelming. But beautiful Emma blinked, confused and amazed. Her heart felt like it might burst. She looked toward Mrs. Collins, who stood at the side of the stage. Wiping her eyes, her teacher mouthed the words. "You did it." Emma smiled, her lips trembling. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. She stood up and bowed, shyly at first, but when the cheering grew louder, she couldn't help but laugh softly. She felt something she had never felt before, pride, real pride. As she walked off stage, the other performers clapped for her too. Even Josh gave her a friendly nod. "That was amazing," he said quietly. Emma smiled back. "Thanks." It felt strange to be praised, but it also felt wonderful. Backstage, Lily ran up and hugged her tightly. "You made everyone go silent," she said, laughing with excitement. "I told you you were special." Emma hugged her back, still shaking from the rush of it all. "I was so scared," she admitted. "But once I started playing, it felt like the piano was talking for me." Lily grinned. "It did, and trust me, and it said everything later." When the assembly ended, people came up to her in the hallway, smiling and congratulating her. Teachers patted her shoulder. Students she barely knew told her she played beautifully. She wasn't invisible anymore. They saw her now, not as the shy girl who sat quietly at the back, but as the girl who had stunned everyone into silence that night when she got home. Her mother was waiting by the window. The moment Emma stepped inside, her mother's eyes filled with tears. "How did it go?" she asked softly. Emma smiled, her face glowing. "They listened, Mom. Really listened." Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you. I told you my music would take you somewhere." As they stood there, the echo of the performance still alive in her heart, Emma realized something. The piano had not only given her courage, it had given her a voice. And for the first time, the world had finally heard her. That night, as she sat at her piano again, she played the same song softly, this time just for herself. The keys felt warm under her fingers. The same melody that once scared her now felt like a part of her soul. And with every note she smiled, remembering how a simple tune had turned into something unforgettable, something magical. The moment when Emma, the shy girl, had stunned the entire assembly into silence. For a moment, the whole hall stayed completely still. It was as if time had stopped. The sound of Emma's final note still hung in the air like a whisper. Soft and trembling, her fingers froze on the keys, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. She could feel her heart beating wildly in her chest. Her eyes lifted slowly, searching the faces in the crowd. But there was no sound, not a single clap, not even a murmur. For one terrifying second, Emma thought she had done something wrong. Maybe she had played too long. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe they didn't like it. Her stomach twisted with fear. Her hands started to shake, and her throat went dry. Then somewhere in the middle of the hall, one person stood up and clapped. The sound echoed through the silence. Then another joined and another, until the entire hall erupted with applause. The noise filled the air like thunder. The sound of hundreds of hands clapping, cheering, shouting her name. Emma sat there frozen, tears forming in her eyes. She had dreamed of being heard, but she never imagined this. People were standing, cheering louder and louder. Her classmates were shouting, "Emma, Emma!" Even those who had laughed at her before. Teachers were smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes. And right there in the front row, Mrs. Collins stood with her hands clasped together, eyes shining with pride. Emma stood up slowly from the piano bench, her legs trembling. She turned toward the audience and gave a small bow. The applause grew even louder. She couldn't stop smiling now, a real, bright smile that reached her eyes. Her whole body felt light, as if all the weight she'd carried inside for years had lifted. From the side of the stage, Lily ran up, waving excitedly, mouthing, "You did it." Emma's eyes sparkled. She couldn't believe it was real. For the first time in her life, people weren't ignoring her. They weren't whispering behind her back. They were looking at her with admiration. With respect, the principal came to the microphone, his voice full of emotion. "That," he said, pausing as the audience quieted, "was one of the most beautiful performances we've ever had here." The audience clapped again, cheering her name once more. Emma's heart swelled with pride and disbelief. She had never been praised like that before, as she walked off the stage. The students backstage greeted her with excitement. "Emma, that was incredible," Josh said, giving her a high five. Ava hugged her. "You were amazing." Even Sarah, who rarely talked to her, smiled and said, "You made everyone cry in a good way." Emma laughed softly, her face glowing red. "Thank you," she whispered, still trembling with joy. Mrs. Collins approached her and gently put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice warm and full of feeling. "You didn't just play music, Emma. You spoke to everyone's heart." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. "I thought I was going to faint," she admitted. Mrs. Collins laughed kindly. "You didn't faint. Sweetheart, you flew." Later, when the assembly ended, parents and students came up to her, wanting to talk. Some wanted to shake her hand. Others just wanted to tell her how much they loved her music. "You play like an angel," one teacher said. "You made me cry." Emma blushed and smiled. "Thank you, ma'am," she said shyly. Even the principal stopped her before she left. "Young lady," he said proudly, "you have a gift. Never stop playing." Emma nodded. "I won't," she promised softly. When she stepped outside the hall, the cool air hit her face. The schoolyard was quiet now. The event was over, but her heart was still racing. She looked up at the sky, her lips trembling with a smile. The stars had started to appear, and she felt like one of them, small but shining. As she walked home, her mind replayed the moment again and again. The silence, the applause, the faces of awe. It all felt like a dream. Her mother was waiting outside their small apartment, standing by the door with tired eyes and a hopeful smile. When she saw Emma, she rushed to her. "So," she asked, breathless, "how was it?" Emma's lips curved into a trembling smile. "Mom," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "They stood up for me, everyone. They clapped so loud." Her mother gasped, tears glistening in her own eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "I knew it. I knew you could do it." Emma buried her face in her mother's shoulder, still shaking. "I was so scared at first," she said between soft sobs. "But once I started playing, it felt like the piano was speaking for me." Her mother smiled and kissed her forehead. "That's because it was," she said gently. "That piano is your voice." And today the whole world heard it. Inside, Emma changed into her pajamas, but her hands still trembled with the memory of the keys. She sat at her piano once more, the same old second-hand instrument that had carried her through so many lonely nights. She pressed one key, and the familiar sound filled the room, soft and comforting. Her mother came and sat beside her. "You know, I used to dream of seeing you on a big stage someday," she said softly. "And today you made that dream come true." Emma looked at her and smiled. "You're the reason I even play, Mom. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the faint echoes of music still alive in their hearts. Emma thought about all the people who had doubted her, all the moments she had wanted to give up. And now here she was, the same shy girl, but no longer afraid. As the night grew quiet, she whispered, "Mom, do you think I can really do something with music someday?" Her mother smiled. "I don't think so, sweetheart." "I know so," Emma laughed softly, pressing another note. The sound was warm and hopeful. Her fingers danced gently across the keys. Not for an audience this time, but for herself, for the joy that came from within. The next morning at school, people smiled at her, waved, called her name. "Emma, that was amazing yesterday," someone shouted. "You're so talented," another said. Emma smiled shyly, still not used to the attention. But deep inside, she felt proud. She had done it. She had faced her fear, stood before the crowd, and turned her trembling heart into music, and in return, the world had given her something she had always longed for: respect, kindness, and a place to belong. That night, as she looked at her piano again, she whispered softly, "Thank you," to the keys that had changed her life. For it was not just the sound she created that stunned the assembly into silence. It was the truth of her heart that spoke through every note. The silence after her song was not emptiness, and it was wonder, the kind that only comes when someone witnesses something pure, something unforgettable, something real. After that unforgettable day, Emma's life slowly began to change. It didn't happen all at once, but piece by piece, her world started to look brighter. The girl who once hid in the back of the classroom was now the name everyone knew. Students who never noticed her before now smiled when they saw her in the hallway. Teachers stopped to tell her how proud they were, and every time someone said, "That performance was beautiful," Emma's heart would warm like sunlight after rain. At first, she didn't know how to handle it. She wasn't used to the attention. When people came up to her and said, "You're so talented," she would blush and look at the floor. "Thank you," she would whisper shyly. She was still the same quiet girl inside, but something had changed. She finally believed she was capable of something special. Her best friend Lily never stopped talking about it. "You should have seen their faces, Emma," she said one morning at school. Everyone was shocked. Even Josh looked like he'd seen a ghost. Emma laughed softly. "I didn't even see them," she said. "I was too scared to look up." "Well," Lily grinned, "maybe that's what made it perfect. You didn't play for them. You played for yourself." Emma thought about that for a moment, and she realized it was true for the first time. She hadn't been trying to impress anyone. She had just let her heart speak through the music. And people had listened after the performance. Things changed at school. The principal invited her to play again at the next big event, and Mrs. Collins suggested she join the regional music competition. "You have something rare, Emma," she said with a proud smile. "Don't hide it anymore." At first, Emma hesitated. "A competition?" she asked nervously. "That sounds scary," Mrs. Collins chuckled. "So was the assembly, wasn't it?" "But you still did it," Emma smiled shyly. "You're right," she said softly. At home, her mother couldn't stop smiling. Every time a teacher or neighbor called to talk about Emma's performance, she would beam with pride. "My little girl," she said one evening, hugging her tightly. "You're finally getting what you deserve," Emma smiled, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "You always said music would take me somewhere," she whispered. "I think it's starting to." Her mother kissed her forehead. "It's only the beginning, sweetheart. The world has finally heard you. Now keep going." Soon after, something amazing happened. One of the teachers had recorded Emma's performance and shared it online. Within days, the video began spreading. Comments poured in from people who didn't even know her. "This moved me to tears," one wrote. "Such emotion from such a young girl," said another. Emma couldn't believe it. Her name was suddenly being mentioned everywhere. Local musicians invited her to perform, and the school received messages asking about the girl who played the piano like an angel. When Emma saw her video for the first time, she couldn't help but smile and cry at the same time. It felt unreal to see herself on a screen, sitting at that big piano, trembling but brave. Her mother sat beside her, eyes filled with tears. "That's my daughter," she whispered proudly. Emma leaned on her and said softly, "That's us, Mom." But even with all the attention, Emma didn't let it go to her head. She still practiced every evening on her old second-hand piano, still the same one her mother had saved up to buy. The keys were a little worn, some of them slightly out of tune, but Emma loved them. To her, that piano was more than an instrument. It was a friend. It had heard her fears, her dreams, her secrets, and now it was carrying her toward a new future. Sometimes when she sat playing late at night, she remembered how it all began. That shy girl sitting in the back of the hall, too scared to even raise her hand. She smiled to herself and whispered, "You did it." She didn't mean it proudly, but thankfully, because she knew it had taken all her courage to take that one small step onto the stage. As weeks passed, her confidence grew. Mrs. Collins gave her more chances to perform, and Emma began helping younger students learn simple songs. They looked up to her with admiration. "You make it look easy," one little girl said. Emma smiled kindly. "It's not easy," she replied, "but it's worth it." One afternoon, after a small performance at a local event, A man approached her. He introduced himself as a music instructor from a nearby academy. "You have real talent," he said, handing her a card. "If you're interested, we offer scholarships for students like you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't wait to tell her mother that night when she showed her the card. Her mother's eyes filled with tears again. "See, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling with joy. "The world is opening its doors for you. You just had to believe in yourself." Emma hugged her tightly. "I still get scared sometimes," she whispered. Her mother smiled. "Everyone does, but courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing it anyway." The two of them laughed softly, and Emma sat at the piano again. She began to play the same song she had performed at the assembly, but this time it sounded different, freer, happier. She wasn't playing to prove anything now. She was simply playing because she loved it. As her fingers danced over the keys, her mother leaned against the door, watching proudly. The tiny apartment glowed with the golden light of sunset, and the melody filled every corner. When the song ended, Emma turned to her mother. "Do you think I'll ever be really great someday?" she asked shyly. Her mother smiled. "You already are. You don't need fame or prizes to be great. You became great the moment you believed in yourself." Emma's heart swelled with warmth. She looked at the piano, at her mother, and at the dreams waiting ahead of her. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was hers. She had found her courage, her voice, and her light that night. As she sat by the window looking at the stars, she whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular, to the piano, to her mother, to the universe that gave her that one chance to show who she really was. And from that day on, Emma was never afraid to take the stage again. She knew that no matter how big the crowd or how bright the lights, as long as she played from her heart, the music would always speak for her, because that was the day Emma learned something powerful. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes the softest sound played with the purest heart can silence the whole world, and that was how the shy, quiet girl with the second-hand piano became the girl whose music touched everyone. The girl who had once been told to play a simple tune, but instead stunned the world into silence.